they bought it, so they've had both of them.
Glasses,
Oh,
but I do
okay.
And a lot of times, sometimes when they
Good.
use that one. Well, anyway, now.
perception. These are my old glasses. I know my power is more than this, but I'm able to see better with this
So,
than I can with that.
what would you buy it for?
Whack and
can't
Kelvin.
you use
Just
the
been
same
postponing it
Yeah, she's got
time and time again. I can see
Does
through
that too.
these, but they're slightly lazy. The new ones,
At the funeral home. So what would you use it for?
I don't know.
With one eye, I don't have depth perception at all. I feel like the
I don't think anybody would want to convert it to a
reflection on
house.
it. Something is wrong with that
For a
lens.
while,
Can't see too well
hasn't
with
it?
it.
Yeah, hopefully.
It's been for sale for a
See if I
while.
can get a text out.
But I don't wear them here.
A month ago when I went by.
Tell me, why can't it be used as a funeral home?
Competition.
We go through everything if it
That
doesn't.
way I can see better here.
It's the only thing we have today.
The look down, right? Instead of doing this,
It was on the sale papers, on their sale papers.
Interesting.
Well,
Maybe he's caught up on the
Jasinski's,
traffic
yeah.
on Belleville Road.
That could be.
it is a funeral home.
The presentation.
That's what the funeral director, that's what the guy that's got it for sale told me.
I got hit.
So do the, how do you say their last name?
This morning. No, 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 hit with the weather, yeah. Yeah, this morning it was super foggy, it's dark, and then coming back, it was just rainy and nasty the whole day.
Nellis and, what was the other guy's name? Anyway, when they left town, they bought it.
Okay.
the heck did I send out?
So they've owned it all this time, but they never changed the name.
Just a copy here.
And used it very rarely, but they would use it occasionally if they had too many.
Plains Pasture.
See, US Planning Commission wanting some
I don't
added
know.
value by having them here to
Yeah.
make their presentation and usually.
Oh,
they
the
have
only
them
reason
here
we're
to
having
take
the meeting
Wish
today.
another dealership would
So
come move
it's up
on
to you if you
Belleville
wanna have us
Road.
do reports
You
and see if
know.
they're here by that time, or,
And if they aren't here and we don't feel like passing or granting without talking to them, it's a
Maybe
table
not for the
until-
funeral home business. I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
those
I
20,
have no clue what these guys.
it's
2016
technically
was just three, and then they decided to have a drive-through thing.
Okay, well,
Continue your sale from
we're here,
Sunday
we
or-
might as well,
Yeah,
otherwise,
just
why
wanted
do
to
we
have
have the
a month.
meeting?
Oh, okay, to the end of the month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
I was
on-
in
on
on
all-
Sunday.
On all
Yeah, here, I'm not gonna hold my breath till I
winter-
actually see them hit the ground with a shovel.
So we're starting to bring out our Valentine's
Spring.
Day and
Okay.
spring.
Well, Rosemary's not here yet either.
Oh, my daughter-in-law and granddaughters had a field day.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Watch
yeah,
by
Nick,
Zoom.
You know, I mean, we had cleared out our back room at our house over the winter, and now it's, now it's starting to get back up, because all the spring stuff. Because you gotta buy it so early.
Okay, it's 5:30. Call the meeting of the Charter Township of Van Buren Planning Commission to order for Wednesday, January 24th, 2024. Can we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Excuse me. Whew. Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Bernie Grant.
Here.
Sherry Budd.
Here.
Peter Creel.
Here.
Medina Atchison.
Here.
Jackson Paul. Jeff Jar.
Here.
Brian Cullen.
Here. Okay, we have the agenda before us. Do we have a motion on the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the agenda.
Support.
We have a motion to approve the agenda and a support. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on, minutes. We have the minutes of the meeting of January 10th, 2024 before us. Do we have a motion concerning the minutes?
Move to approve as submitted.
Support.
We have a motion to approve the minutes as presented and support. All in favor, signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We don't have any correspondence or announcements at this point. No public hearings, old business. Moving on. New business. Case 23057 R.A. Chasey as Architects, 10553 through 7-1 Belleville Road, multi-tenant retail building, preliminary site plan review. A request by R.A. Chasey Architects to construct a 10,362 square foot multi-tenant retail building, parking, landscaping, and affiliated site improvements. The site is 1.74 acres in an area and is zoned C1 General Business District. The site is located at 10553 through 10571 Belleville Road. Parcel ID number 8305901, 0021 000, and 0020000. On Belleville Road between North Interstate 94 Service Drive and West Lake Circle. We have a presentation by the township staff. Director Power.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant has clarified that they'll be running between 5 and 10 minutes behind tonight due to the weather and some conditions on the roads. So what I would suggest is if the planning commission is amenable, we'll still have our planning consultant, senior principal planner with McKenna, Vidya Krishnan, and our township engineer, Paul Kamer, go through their reports and hear their comments, and then we'll be able to have the applicant present at that point if that's acceptable to the planning commission.
I don't see a problem with it.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Jar.
the applicant's completely aware of all of the reports that have been submitted so far. No new
Yes.
information being presented without the applicant here. I also agree.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before we move forward? Okay, Director Power.
I think the details of the case are going to be laid out in our planning consultant's report, so I'll turn this over to Vidya Krishnan and follow along on some of the comments in the slides.
Thank you, Director Power. The site is pretty familiar to the Planning Commission. It's been before this board multiple times, beginning in December of 2016. At the time, the applicant came before you and received preliminary site plan approval for a 3-unit commercial building. And the Board of Trustees granted special land use approval the same month for a drive-through with the building. That project then expanded because the applicant acquired an additional parcel to its north. So once they acquired the additional parcel, they expanded the scope of the project, and they came back in 2018 with a new site plan with additional tenant units. And once again, it did have a drive-through, and the drive-through was also approved and received special land use approval. But that was still only preliminary approval. At the time, the applicant never came back for final site plan approval. So effectively, the site plan review process has been restarted by the applicant at this time. And what is before you is a multi-tenant retail building with white box tenant spaces. Although the applicant has special land use approval for a drive-through, special land use runs with the land. However, the proposed uses on the site do not include a drive-through component. Should the applicant choose to add a drive-through in the future, they will have to come back before you because the existing layout of the site will not work for a drive-through. So they will have to come back before you for a full site plan approval. In the event, they will not need to go through the special land use approval process though. So the site comprises of multiple parcels of land. We would like all of it to be combined into a single tax parcel ID prior to issuance of permits. As I mentioned, the site is being built as a multi-tenant retail unit space with multiple tenant spaces. The site is zoned C1. The uses proposed at this time are 2 of the 6 tenants being sit-down fast casual restaurants and 4 tenant spaces devoted to retail stores. All of these are principal permitted uses in the C1 district. The proposed building complies with all of the required setbacks and the height limitation for the C1 district. With regard to access for a site with the frontage that this site has got on Belleville Road, only a single access drive is permitted by the zoning ordinance, and a 32-foot wide 2-way access drive has been proposed, which is consistent with what was shown on the 2018 plan also. Cross-access is required for most of the parcels that are up and down Belleville Road. The applicant does show a clear stub along the north property line to connect to the parcel to the north. To the south, there is an existing cross-access easement with Bell Tire. However, based on what the applicant has let us know, Bell Tire will not let them connect to that cross-access easement. I think the township has to further investigate that, because the whole point of requiring a cross-access is to allow your neighbor to connect to it, but apparently Bell Tire has insisted they're not going to allow that to happen even though there is an easement in place. So that is something the township will have to explore with the legal in order to find out what can be done from our end to make sure Bell Tire does allow that. Apparently they decided they don't want to allow it. The emergency management and circulation on the site, we believe it is satisfactory. However, final approval must come from the fire department. Sidewalks are proposed throughout the site. 5-foot wide sidewalks are there along the public road frontage. There are sidewalks along the sides of the building, providing clear access from the parking spaces to the building. In the sidewalk area, I have made a reference to RV parking. Kindly disregard that. The parallel parking spaces shown on the rear of the building are vehicular parking spaces. They are not RV parking spaces. The utilities on the site, there are existing overhead electrical wires that are proposed to be relocated in coordination with the utility company. The applicant had previously stated that the utility will be rerouted behind the building. So we would like to know exactly where those utility lines are going to be rerouted. Our ordinance typically requires that all new utilities be placed underground. That's what we have required all newer projects to do, but this is something I will defer to the township engineer to describe further to see if that is feasible in this case. As to parking requirement, the site does meet the required parking count for the ordinance for retail stores and sit-down restaurants that do not serve liquor. The reference to RV spaces was a small confusion because previously when they had a drive-through component included, the zoning ordinance has a provision that if there is a drive-through restaurant within a quarter to a half mile of a freeway, 2 RV parking spaces must be provided. So multiple initial iterations of this plan did have the RV parking space shown, but once the drive-through was eliminated, we continued looking at it like it was an RV space. It is not, it's a vehicular parking spaces, and the site does meet all of the requirements. So the underlined paragraph under 5A would kindly be disregarded. All of the parking spaces meet the dimensional requirements of the ordinance and are to be double striped. We have extensive landscape requirements in our zoning ordinance. For the most part, the site complies. The biggest, there are some small discrepancies in the tree counts and the kind of species used, which are small fixes which the landscape architect can easily make. One of the biggest issues for discussion is the screening adjacent to a C1 zoned area. When the applicant appeared before you in 2018, the Planning Commission granted a deviation to remove the south side buffer adjacent to Bell Tire because you wanted to have ample room. The drive-through stacking was along that side. You wanted to have ample room to allow for a bypass lane that would accommodate a fire truck to be able to make the movement. At this time, there is no drive-through, but the applicant is still seeking a deviation to not provide the 5-foot wide buffer along the south side. The north side is one way heading towards the exit, so we thought it would be logical for the south side to be one way heading east. If the north side is one way heading west, that way it would provide for a complete loop around the property. However, the applicant has a potential tenant who's going to occupy the south end of the building, which is Sherwin-Williams. Apparently, Sherwin-Williams has got very strict requirements of what the tenant space configuration and the parking abutting it must be for them to actually sign a lease with such building. And apparently, if there is one-way circulation, the applicant will have to make the parking spaces on the south side angled so that people don't try to go on the wrong side of the driveway. Sherwin-Williams does not accept angled parking spaces. They would like to have two-way movement on the south side of the building per the applicant. So at this time, the applicant is seeking a deviation from the 5-foot buffer requirement from the Planning Commission. I will defer to the applicant to make their case before you for further discussion. With regard to mechanical equipment, there is a transformer pad that is shown on the east side of the building, and it is shown screened by some boxwood shrubs, some fountain grasses, and a linden tree. At a minimum, the height of the landscaping that screens the transformer must meet or exceed the height of the transformer. It's not screening if it's shorter than the transformer itself. So that's a note to be made. This site is located in our Belleville Road Overlay District, and as such, it has got additional standards for public amenities, such as bicycle and pedestrian access. To be provided, there are 3 bicycle parking spaces located near the outdoor eating area on the southwest side of the building. The proposed building materials that are brick and the accent materials, which are EFIS and pre-colored ground face concrete block, also appear to meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance. The material colors are shown on the plan. We had recommended that the applicant bring building material samples before you tonight, considering some of the previous issues encountered, so that you can actually see what the material looks like and it corresponds to what is shown on the elevations. A lighting plan has been submitted for the site, and all of the proposed fixtures are downward directed and appropriately shielded. There is a trash enclosure shown on the property. It is to be constructed on the east side of the building, and it's got a concrete block wall with brick veneer to match the building on 3 sides and a composite face steel reinforced gate on the 4th side. The dumpster enclosure is at least 100 feet from the single-family residential zoning further to the east. With regard to signs, conceptual wall signs are shown on the building facade itself, which is typical for a white box building. Until they know the tenants, they will not know the sign that is going to be installed. All signs will need to be submitted for administrative approval, and at the time, Director Power will check that it meets the maximum sign area allowance for the site itself. The site is proposing a single monument sign along the frontage on Belleville Road, which does meet ordinance standards. I defer to the township engineer for engineering review and approval. This site has been in the process of development for several years now, beginning in 2016, 8 years. And even this version of the plan has been consistently under discussion with the applicant, because they had Sherwin-Williams, and apparently Sherwin-Williams is one of the driving forces behind the current site design and is sort of dictating some of the design elements that the applicant has incorporated in this. In fact, it was the inclusion of Sherwin-Williams that resulted in the elimination of the drive-through, because the applicant was unable to resolve a conflict where they can have the loading area for Sherwin-Williams, which wouldn't actually end up blocking the drive-through lane. And we said you can have one or the other, you cannot have both, because you will have people walking right across the truck loading dock, which is not a safe. So the applicant decided to drop the drive-through in order to accommodate the loading unloading facility for this building. At this time, there are a few items that remain to be addressed, a couple of which require Planning Commission input, specifically the buffer along the south property line. So it is our recommendation that the Planning Commission grant preliminary site plan approval for Belleville Retail Center to be located at 10573 Belleville Road, subject to the 11 conditions that are noted in the McKenna review letter dated January 2nd of 2024. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Kamer, do you have?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As Ms. Krishnan mentioned, previous site plans were reviewed, more recently the site plan in 2018. And while the site plan itself has changed, utility accessibility has remained the same, obviously, with existing utilities surrounding the site. So many of our comments that we had in the previous approval phase for preliminary site plan remain the same on this letter as they did back in our 2018 review. And I will go over the main topics of concern that we had at that time, which remain today. And as just a reminder to the Commission, at this time, Fishbeck examines and reviews the feasibility of the engineering aspects of the site, but will not conduct a full engineering review until the final site plan and engineering review submittal is completed. Our general comments include basic elements, but the main concerns within the general comments are that any soil boring information must be included, which includes groundwater elevation, especially with some of the deep excavations that are being proposed for the sanitary sewer along Belleville Road. All underground utilities must be shown on all plans, including the landscape plans, and Oh, and within the plans, we also asked that the applicant include all permits that are going to be required for the site. For the water main service on site, there is an existing 16-inch ductile iron water main that runs north and south on the west side of Belleville Road that currently services the existing lots, or it's vacant now, but serviced the existing lots where the site is proposed. The proposed water main includes adding an 8-inch ductile iron water main along the west side of the property, the east side of Belleville Road, and connects to the 8-inch water main in the northwest corner of the property to the south. So essentially, the water main from the Belleville site, which was brought across Belleville Road, will be connected to in the southwest corner of the existing site. Further discussions with the township engineer and the water and sewer department regarding the abandonment of the existing service leads will be required. And more detail on the connection of the existing system at the Belleville site will be required as part of the engineering plans. There's little information in the township, the existing township site, that gives way to how the configuration of that site is. And the applicant must access or have access to the property to the south to connect to the existing water line with in existing easements, utility details, and these things will be worked out or must be worked out as part of the engineering design. But the water main is there. There is water available for the site. For the sanitary sewer, there is an existing 18-inch concrete sanitary sewer that runs north and south along the east side of Belleville Road. The applicant's plan indicate a 10-inch PVC water main running along the south side of the building, or the south and east sides of the building, tapping into the 5 service leads from each of the tenants of the building. The applicant is proposing to connect this proposed sanitary main to the existing 18-inch water sanitary service at a manhole on the south side of the site. So this was one of our main concerns when we reviewed this previously. We've had other developments along Belleville Road connect into the existing sanitary along this east side of Belleville Road. The sanitary main runs relatively deep and very close to the existing Belleville traffic lane. And we asked the applicant to provide, during engineering, provide more details on how the applicant will build this and connect to this and what impact it will have within the Belleville Road right-of-way and potentially traffic along that line. Previous sites, the DDA building had a similar connection just north of this site, and we don't foresee it being an issue other than making sure that soil borings are taken in this area, Wayne County permits are granted, and proper maintenance of traffic are developed to protect the public while this work is being conducted. That's the main concern at this point for sanitary. For the stormwater management, there is currently stormwater lines that run along Belleville Road, like all the other utilities. The applicant's site proposes a system of stormwater collection with catch basins and manholes that eventually discharge into an underground storage detention system, as shown in green here in front of the building, that will be discharged into the stormwater system along Belleville Road. This system is an existing Wayne County system that the applicant, we asked that they further investigate exactly the size and location and depths of this site. The previous iteration of this site back in 2018 utilized a lift station or a pump station to essentially lift the water out of the detention basin because of the shallowness of the existing site. The current plans here do not show any type of lift or pump station to get the water from the underground detention into the existing site. It's something that can be added to it and needs to be investigated a little bit further. Just to read my comments here, the applicant must develop a full stormwater management plan with calculations for final engineering review and must be in accordance with the county stormwater management standards as well as the township management standards. Prior to engineering review, it is recommended that the applicant review and receive county approval or at least county discussions on their proposed system in order to hit these early design struggles and before coming back to us with engineering plans. The applicant should note that the township stormwater design standards are a bit more stringent than the county standards, and we can work with the applicant to provide what we've done in the past to accommodate both the county and township standards. Other than that, some other basic ideas on geometrics of emergency access around the building shall be reviewed by the township fire marshal. Soil erosion and sediment control plans and permits will be required from Wayne County. And in general, just all other engineering requirements based on the township engineering manual will be required as part of the township or as part of the applicant's engineering submittal. But at this time, based on engineering feasibility, accessibility to township facilities, Fishbeck recommends that the Planning Commission grant the Belleville Road Retail Development Project preliminary site plan approval based on this feasibility. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kamer. Director Power, do you have anything there from the fire marshal?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the applicant did provide an updated set of plans that the initial reports that were provided, they attempted to address some of the comments. The fire marshal provided a later version of his memo that I had thought made it into the packet, but I'm having a little trouble locating it. So I'll refer to the updated comments digitally here, if you bear with me just 1 second. So the fire marshal has reviewed the site plan, was part of the preliminary staff site plan review process. There are some comments regarding water supply, and the main comment here is that the plans show 3 fire hydrants spaced around the building on an 8-inch ductile iron water main. Those 3 hydrants will be adequate for supplying the required fire flow. Regarding fire department access, the comment was that an approved access road shall be provided for every facility, building, or portion of a building hereafter constructed. And the updated comment in that regard is that the fire department access, as shown in the latest submittal, is adequate. However, the sign schedule located on sheet AS2 shows a minimum of only 2 no parking fire lane signs. That would not be adequate to maintain access on all sides of the building, and so that will have to be addressed with the final site plan submittal. There is an emergency vehicle access plan at the direction of the fire marshal, Deputy Fire Chief Lenahan, to provide turning templates for the longest fire apparatus, which is 49'7" in length. There were comments regarding address identification that will just have to be part of the permit submittal eventually to show the address legibly from street view. And there's also comments regarding what's called a Knox box, which is required for each tenant space. The latest submittal still showed only 1 Knox box for the retail center, and so the each tenant space will be required to purchase a Knox box for that space. A couple of other comments that there will have to be an emergency responder radio coverage system, or there may need to be. That will have to be something that's tested for, and if the antenna and the signals related to that are insufficient, then that would need to be installed. And finally, the gas meter banks shown on the plans are required to be labeled to identify the gas meter coverage on each tenant space. I do apologize, I had a technical glitch where I would have tried to show some of the comments from the planning consultant and township engineer a little bit more thoroughly, but I have, just for your awareness, I have the ability to pull up the site plans and the building rendering on the screen if you'd like to look at that in greater detail on the screen. But we do have the applicant, Jason Kishmish, here, as well as his architect. And we would typically refer to them to make some comments or a brief presentation if they desire to. So I guess at that, I'll turn that back over to you, Mr. Chair, and you can invite them to speak if you'd like.
Okay, to the applicants, you made it.
Good evening. Sorry for walking in late. My 55-minute drive turned to be an hour and 45-minute drive due to things on the highway. I'm Ron Chiesa, RA Chiesa Architects. Dan, is it possible to get our site plan up? Thanks. Obviously, I didn't hear what happened prior, but we were here a couple years ago, I believe it was. We had basically the same type of building design. There's a tenant that is going to move in that kind of drove us to relay out the site versus the way it looked previously. We have more parking in the front versus what we had before. We had a lot of parking in the back, so actually that works out better for pedestrian as well as the tenants themselves to have access, customer traffic. Everyone likes to park in the front versus the back. They're not going to walk around the building. So in any event, we did not redesign the building. We kept it the same color, same design as what was previously approved for preliminary site plan approval. We were actually getting ready to come in for final, and then there were some issues that came up with interested tenants and parties, and then we got into going through some changes regarding that, so that's why we're back here tonight. I do want to clarify that obviously the two parcels will be combined into one parcel as this goes through the planning stages here. And we will have a cross-access easement. We've got it shown on our plan that would run from site to site. It has been noted, as well as I've spoke in the past, that Bell Tire is very against having the cross-access. I said their attorneys are going to get involved on it. I said, well, it's out of my jurisdiction, so I'll let that be dealt with by others. But we have provided it. We've lined it up with where theirs would be, so we've met that requirement. The topic has come up regarding the DTE power lines that we have to reroute around the building. And I understand your ordinance wants things underground. These utility poles, which we're proposing to go behind the building and wrap around, that will be determined by DTE. We have no jurisdiction on that. Obviously, the feed from those poles will go underground to the transformer, and then will be underground from the transformer to the secondary power to the building itself. So DTE will not talk to anyone until you have a legit approved project. So we can't get into specifics regarding it, other than the poles will be relocated around the building to meet the requirements of DTE. We've got enough of a green belt loading area behind the building, which actually worked out better in this concept for that to happen. So in any event, I do want to just bring that to your attention. Regarding, there was a comment regarding our landscaping in the front, where we have some perennials in these areas. We've shown that we meet that requirement. We had the right quantities. We actually have more than what's required. We have more than what the linear footage is required. So our landscaping's in greater supply than what's required per the ordinance. One of the issues that I do want to talk about is our interior parking lot landscaping. Based on our calculations, we need roughly 2,400 square feet of green area on the site. We've met the spirit of the ordinance for that. There was some comments regarding our sizes of some of our areas don't meet your minimums that you have of 360 square feet for any area that's a green area. So that's kind of hard to do in reality. You know, you're at a 10 by 36 area or a 20 by 18 area to accommodate that. We have met that requirement. As you can see behind the building, we've got a lot of green areas. We've got a seating area with a couple tables for the staff so that they can take a break, eat their lunch. Our transformer is located behind the building. We've got some trees and planting. You know, so we've met the spirit of that. Some of the islands up, like in the upper left by the tree that's in the fuchsia color, that can't be any larger because of our tracking. We have to, for Sherwin, I guess is that okay?
Yeah, we already declared the tenant as Sherwin-Williams.
So for Sherwin-Williams, they use the largest semi cross-country, over-the-road, biggest one, sleeper. So we had to make sure that they could track in. So we had to massage our curbing so that their truck can actually get around the site. So when we have an island that might fall short, if I can reach this, for example, like up in here, we have a lot of room here, but we can't make that any greater in size because the truck just can't maneuver around. So I think, I understand the ordinance and we have met the requirement of the square footage, but it's, when you add them all up, it meets your ordinance. Each one specifically doesn't meet the 360. Some are larger, some are smaller, but in general, we have met that. So we did our best to do that. I know this board has the ability to approve that. So I do want to address that topic. So the other thing that I do want to bring up is we have met your tree requirements. It was noted that maybe we changed some of our trees to a shade tree, and I'd prefer not to. We have smaller ornamental trees, which are the pink trees. Thereby, lights, there would be a burgundy colored tree, so then we also have shade trees, which are green. So we're trying to mix up the colors and add some color and interest around the building. But the problem with the shade trees, and all communities have to really take a look at their ordinances regarding shade trees and parking lots and islands. Shade trees grow 50 to 80 feet. Their spread also gets 50 to 60 feet wide. When the light poles are only allowed to be 20 or 25 feet and the tree grows to 50 to 80 feet, it engulfs the light poles. The lights are virtually, we could take them off the site because they're just not going to be practical. So, and also the shade trees, if they have a 50-foot canopy, their roots go out 50 feet. So those roots actually work on the curbing, the parking lot, they start to crack things. So it's really better practice if you use more of a smaller ornamental tree that's 20 to 30 feet tall when it maxes out and is only about 15 feet wide. So that way it doesn't engulf the lights that anyone has on the site, whether it's us or someone else. It's a problem that we see all the time. In the old days, when I was going to college and working in a firm, we could have light poles that were 50 feet high. Now you just can't have that anymore. So in any event, I would like, this board's consideration on, we do meet the ordinance as far as the number of trees, the species, that I'd like to keep it as what we have currently on our plan. Now, one of the things I do want to point out, it was mentioned about building materials and colors. Our building will not change from what we had provided last time we were in here, and we will bring samples in of the two burnished block, which are these colors down here, and then we've got two different shades of brick. So we're just working through that with our office, getting samples from manufacturers. So before we come back for a final, we would definitely bring those with us. So with that being said, that's kind of addresses some of the planning comments. The engineer regarding the civil engineering basically recommended approval based on their comments. We forward those comments off to our civil engineer so that he can get those reflected in his package for the final submittal. So he's working on that currently. I just came in at tail end regarding the fire, and I do want to point out that the fire department said that we have access as shown on our plan, so it's adequate. So we've satisfied their tracking. We've submitted the emergency vehicle access plan, so they've noted that. We obviously will have proper addresses on the front and rear per code. That's just a typical. In the Knox boxes, some communities allow one per building. We've shown one. We don't know how many tenants will be here, so where they're going to go and how many we have is just something we can't provide at this point. Typically, when the tenant improvement plans are turned in, the fire marshals and communities will put a note in that a Knox box is to be provided. When they come out to do their final inspection, then they verify that the Knox box is there. We do design build work ourselves, and when we do a tenant space or a building that we've designed, we actually hand over the keys to them. We meet them on site. They put the keys in the box, and it's done. So again, those are items that shouldn't delay any type of approval. So with that being said, I will answer any questions. Jason, I don't know if you want to make a couple comments.
Jason Kishmish from Grand Management and Development. Appreciate all of your time and consideration for our plan. It has been a long journey here. Just to give you a little bit of background, because I always get posed the question, what are you doing on Belleville Road? What's going on? What's going on? And Dan and Vidya, we've worked tirelessly. I appreciate everything that they've done to help us bring this hopefully to fruition. But we had preliminary site plan approval back in 2018. I can't believe it was really that long, but feel like the Lions, man. We've got to get this one over the finish line here. 2018 preliminary site plan approval. We then went to engineering, engaged Wayne County in a very tedious civil review. Their process is exhausting, but we actually were permitted and approved through Wayne County at that time. We met all their ordinances and all their requirements at that time. We will do the same thing again. Whether they need something tweaked or not, we'll get through that. But then we had the pandemic kind of hit. By the time I got enough tenants to actually justify building the thing and being able to get the financing in place, the pandemic hit and everything went awry again. And unfortunately, a majority of the tenants that I had committed at that time kind of flaked away because of all the different things that were going on. And I worked for the next 2 years tirelessly to try to attract some different users, and we spent a real good amount of time playing around with other users that I'll say probably weren't as desirable to the community as this plan. And instead of kind of going down that path and wasting more time, whether it's a car wash or a gas station or whatever it may be, I said, you know what? Let's just go build what we were intending on building. I had faith in the plan then. I have faith in it now. And I was able to finally get Sherwin-Williams on board. You know, they were somebody we had talked to in the past, and they are a big driving force behind this. Their credit rating's better than the United States government right now, is my understanding. But they are a big driving force behind this. They'll be a great complement to this community. They see it as a growing community. There's a need here for their services. A little finicky about what they want, and I'll give you a little background on, why this loading and why we would appreciate the consideration again for the landscaping buffer that was waived last time. They use a WB67 truck, which is probably, like Ron mentioned, the biggest truck that they have. And I don't know what area, what town, but at some point they had an accident where their loading truck, I guess, ran into somebody that was coming out of the buildings. And since then, it's kind of been their corporate policy that they really have the loading segregated in a way that it's as safe as possible. I had a lot of heartache with it because it meant I had to give up my drive-through, even though we gave them countless renditions of loading that was segregated and safe, and that drive-through could still function. And unfortunately, we just couldn't get them to accept it. So I had to make a decision: table this back, kind of go start again, find someone else, or give them what they want. Give up my drive-through, which is incredibly high demand in your community. And I said, I want to build something here this year. I'm done and sick of looking at it, just sitting there, got a ton of money tied up into it. So we after considering everything, this was really the best plan put forward. We gave it the drive-through, and we gave them the loading that was fine, that they wanted. I built this stuff all over the state. We probably got a little bit less than 1 million square feet in our portfolio. I can tell you from our standpoint, we hate one-way drives because people are people and they will still find a way to go down a one-way drive. You want to give them at least one option to be able to get out of the site if they're trapped. And I've seen it happen, people they just do what they do, unfortunately. All we can do as designers is try to mitigate as much of that as possible. But there's no plan on earth that we can ever give anyone that will completely eliminate any risk. That's just the reality of the world. But this two-way drive to me is really fundamental. And Sherwin's basically told me it's a no-go if they don't get it. One, for their loading to be able to kind of come in the way it needs to and comfortably. And two, just for our purposes, having a second option for people to exit the site from the rear we think is very beneficial and will create less issues with loading and anybody else that's going down the one-way drive. Cross-access with Bell Tire. We beat this to death back in 18 and we tried again recently. They're really busy at that tire store over there. I don't know if you guys have ever visited that. They don't want nothing to do with anyone else's traffic coming through their door. So the exact words that we were told were, we'll fight it to death. We were not required to do it for our site plan, or if they were, it never was recorded or, never done at that time. But they indicated to us that they would not be open to that. Even I offered a bunch of other stuff, money, and, told them that if there's anything else we can do to enhance their site, they were not willing to really budge on that. So we obviously are showing it. I'm not crazy about cross-access from other sites, but I understand the rationale behind it and the need to keep people off the roads. It just kind of depends, if you got a really high-volume user next door and they're kind of using your site to circulate through, it causes some other issues, but it's in there. And so, Ron's been drawing this stuff for me for 20 years. I argue with him every time, and he always ends up winning some way, somehow. Out of what I want to do sometimes, because at the end of the day, he's the design professional. He knows that there's certain things that these buildings need to function, and we don't always understand it, but all that goes into how these things are successful. Having a little bit more parking up front, I was always a little concerned about that with the initial plan, but the drive-through necessitated, just our overall layout necessitated it. Now with eliminating that, putting some more parking up front, we've got a little bit more flexibility on being able to bring not just a carry-out user, but maybe somewhere where like a family restaurant or something like that can sit down here. And I just like it better. It's just customers coming, walking all around the building, coming to the front. You want to minimize as much of that for safety purposes as possible. So I like this. I don't like the fact that we pushed the building further back, but that was the balance of, getting more parking up front, making the development a little bit safer, a little bit more customer friendly. So a lot of thought's been gone into this. We've exhausted so many different avenues, so many different renditions on this plan. Like I said, Dan and Vidya, I've probably taken up their patience on this thing. But as challenging of an environment as it is to build anything right now, and I can tell you from a development standpoint, it is probably one of the worst times ever to build it. I'm ready to go on this, and we'd like your support tonight. And if we are, we'll get this up and running in 2024, and hopefully we'll get some quality tenants. And the people I'm talking to right now, they're all national brands, they're quality. This will be a very similar development to what you see a little bit further down the road where the Starbucks is. Everything, color schemes are very similar. I think we have maybe a little bit more parking up front. They do. They have a drive-through, we don't anymore, but that's kind of the spirit of the development. I thought that development worked out pretty well. So appreciate your help with this, finally getting it over the finish line. And whatever we need to do to address any concerns, by all means, we want a quality development. We don't sell our properties. We build them, and hopefully our kids someday can enjoy them. So I'm here to stay. Thank you.
Thank you. Planning Commission, questions, comments?
Through the chair,
Commissioner Grant.
I have a couple questions for senior planner, principal planner Vidya, and then I have some for the applicant. Just for clarification purposes for us as well as the applicant, when you're talking about building materials and colors, you use the word appear to meet. Could you clarify for everyone what that means? It's on page what page it is, page 20, where it says building materials and colors, says the primary building materials, brick and accent materials, EIFS and pre-colored ground face block appear to meet, so.
We use the term appear because sometimes earth tones, when what we consider as earth tones and what the Belleville Road Overlay District requires, as we have learned the hard way, the print does not necessarily match what you see actually. So we say appears because on the rendering that you see over here, the color palette definitely meets the B-Rod district, but we would say that for sure once the Planning Commission actually sees, which Mr. Chiesa, the actual building materials, every single material that is used on the building must be bought before the Planning Commission. When you,
Yeah, we're very sensitive about that.
yeah.
And that, if I
And
could-
I would have actually strongly encouraged you to bring it this evening, because if we do grant preliminary, you push all your materials into the final round, which means you run a lot more risk to not get it approved that night. So I would say, if you do it again, I would encourage you to do it early rather than later.
bring them last time when we got preliminary, and I can tell you the building will look like this. We have the samples. We're just playing around with shading right now. You don't need to see the EFA shade, do you? Which is,
Well, actually, Mr. Chiesa, we need to see every single material, and a lot has changed since 2018. We just had a building where what they showed and what they put on the building, they had to rip out every single exterior material on the entire building to redo it because it did not match what they said it would. So for your own comfort and so that you don't invest in something, the Planning Commission wants to see the actual brick and the actual brand that will go on the building.
And we-
Nothing similar. So
right, we have that. You don't need to see a section of the aluminum framing for the glass, do you?
I would say anything that you see on that facade, we want to see. I mean, I would encourage it. I mean, I've done it. I mean, just so that everybody understands the color of the framing system, whatever, if it's just clear anodized or dark bronze or whatever you choose. I think
Doesn't
it's-
help that our drawings call it out. They specify that it's clear anodized.
I don't think everybody is familiar with, I would encourage you to bring it all. I mean, no matter how big it is, as long as someone can see the color. The thing is, and the color tones against one another makes a huge difference. I mean, I think it's better that way. It's easier for us to approve it that way.
Bring a big piece of framing with us when we come.
As
We'll
big
have
as,
to
or
bring
as big
a
as little
wagon.
as you want.
Bring a wagon.
So to finish, sorry, I got a couple more. The two-way traffic, you had mentioned that originally you were trying to encourage the one-way circulation around the site, but given the, the client that they have, we're looking at an exception that on one side it's two-way. Do you have any concern that on the north side that you have a 17-foot wide drive, which I don't know if you can get two-way traffic through there, but you make a good point that human nature says you're going to go through there even if it's one-way, given the other side is two-way. Is there any concern for any type of conflict of one side to the other?
typically, we would prefer to have both sides of the
Right.
building, either it's a one-way loop or it is a two-way loop on both sides. But in
Right.
this case, the site is limited by its area. So we have made sure that the applicant has ample signage on the north side of the building. It'll be on both sides of the drive aisle. That'll clearly say, on the other side, it'll say no entry, one way only. So in spite of that, if somebody does it, like he said, people are people, but hopefully they
What would
won't.
you consider to be dimensionally a good, reasonable minimum two-way drive?
Minimum for two-way is typically 22 is the bare minimum I have seen anywhere.
Okay, so that's about 5 feet narrower.
So in this case, I think they are proposing ample signage to direct people that this is a one-way only from the other side.
Right, but
Your ordinance, so I may, also specifies when you have a one-way, what you have to have. Problem is, if we would say, all right, we're gonna have a 20-foot
Right.
one-way, people definitely will come in that way. This is 17 feet. The typical driveway on a house with a two-car garage is 16 feet unless it's extended. So if somebody did come in that way, could someone go around them? Yes. Can you police it? Even if you only, I seen tonight while we were stuck on the expressway, a car drove off the road to drive around everyone like he was just merging onto the expressway. And, so you can't
You always have the sidewalk, right?
Four-wheel drive, you can jump it.
I mean, it's just, it could happen, I'll just say that. The other question that I have has to do with the island size. You mentioned that they're a little undersized,
That's,
or is it all of them?
no, it's a couple of them in the rear of the building, the one
Okay.
with the pink trees that you see, those are much smaller, but if the islands are made larger, like Mr. Chiesa said, it is going to affect circulation, and the islands are still viable, so I would support a reduction in the size of the island. The trees will still survive, it'll still provide attractive. I would rather the site has ample circulation for vehicles to move around. So
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to the request for deviation for the island sizes.
Yeah, and quite frankly, it's a public area that they're trying to create back there for, it looks like that, right? That we're seating and then some further, yeah. So it's like it's a more cohesive unit rather than a singular little
And
island.
the elimination of the
Yeah.
drive-through definitely created more landscaping in the rear of the building and the
Yeah.
site. I believe elimination of the drive-through from this site was a good thing, because it is a tight site.
And then the last thing is that, that cross access on the south side. Can we, I mean, at this point in time, I mean, it's not something that, I mean, it might be a requirement that might still just sit there, but I don't know how you impose that on someone where they have to fight for it.
But
Right, you can show it, yeah,
Yes.
Right, it will be recorded.
right, exactly.
Applicant
Okay.
will be doing what they're doing. I am pretty certain, I was around when Bell Tire was reviewed and approved, the cross-access was required, and I believe it was recorded too.
Okay, good.
So I don't know what Bell Tire is saying when they say they're going to fight it till the end. Well, you recorded the easement voluntarily as part of your site plan approval. So that's something I'll have to discuss with Director Power and see where we stand. I mean, the easement is on their property. They're just not allowing this development to
I think
connect.
you're right. In all of our work that we did to try and they just landscaped it the way they wanted, but I believe you're correct. I think it is recorded.
It is a recorded easement. They just, at the time, the site was vacant to the north, so they just said, we'll put in the landscaping, and in the future, somebody can connect.
Okay,
And then they decided they don't want to let the future to connect.
I'd love to.
yeah. And talking about landscaping, the trees,
Uh-huh.
there's mention about sort of a substitute on ornamental trees versus shade trees. What shade is it? Was that the case what I had heard?
Yes, I believe we had recommended that some of the landscape island trees be more deciduous rather than ornamental. Ornamentals are smaller with
Right,
smaller canopies. They're colorful. Shade trees, because it creates these urban hotspots because you have so much parking, but then again, that's a valid point.
Yeah.
Taller deciduous trees have extensive root systems. Do we need them to pick up? So
What kind are they?
the ones that they had proposed,
Required versus what they're offering.
They're offering redbud that are ornamental.
Yeah, I know,
And
yeah. But the,
linden would be more of a shade tree that would have a broader canopy.
linden. Lindens are the shade trees. We said instead of having so many red buds, split them with the lindens. So
okay,
And we
And-
do have a couple lindens on the site.
okay, that's fine. And then just a quick question for the applicant, just more of a question. I noticed that your paving section is the inch and a half more of a, automobile traffic. Do you have any concern, which I'm just asking the question because this is a heavy-duty truck carrying a lot of weight.
Correct.
It's the largest one that they have, is what you were saying. Do you have any concern for it tearing up the pavement on the south side to the point where it's just, that it's going to be a maintenance issue, it's going to look bad after a while?
So
It's just,
we've paved with 5 inches before. It really comes down to the underlying base.
correct.
And what you're gonna put in there. So as long as that's compacted, full, done the right way, pavement should last.
And you-
Some of my developments, I actually look at doing some of these areas that are drive-throughs specifically, we do them in concrete.
Right.
This whole idea of the loading really ticked me off with these guys, because their loading is once a week, maybe twice a week. It's not that prevalent, but they're just really sticklers about it. When we get into it, maybe we'll look at the loading area going into concrete.
Yeah.
I don't know if it doesn't necessarily.
It's not going to do
necessitates
anything. That's
that-
not, the whole issue with that, the most strenuous pressure on the pavement is during turning cycles. So
Yeah.
the truck being parked is irrelevant.
Yeah, that's true.
So obviously, we have to do the minimum of what your ordinance requires. And, you know, if during construction, it's evaluated that, hey, maybe we should look at this and go with a deep strength asphalt. But like Jason said, you have to have a good base. If you have a good base, you could have 1.5 inches of asphalt.
Right, your base right now is a typical automotive parking base, right?
Well, you have the proper stone. I mean, we're doing a building addition right now. We tore some asphalt paving that was 1.5 inches and it was just on sand. That was allowed in the old days, 1.5 inches on sand. Today, you've got to have at least 6 inches of stone plus whatever the asphalt mix is per each community. So in any event, it's always taken into account what's going on that site. It's not a road. It's not getting pounded like a road. Truck can't maneuver in here fast.
And as owner, you have to maintain it anyway, right? And if-
100%,
and I
it's
would
the
im-
biggest expense.
I would imagine if it fails due to this truck or truck traffic that you're gonna fix it, correct?
I have to, I'm not gonna have a choice.
Just
that's-
saying,
that's
just
a-
thought I'd wanna hear it.
That's our biggest thing right now is these
Okay.
parking lots, because the asphalt people are using, it's
Yeah.
crap, it's gone to crap.
And it's easier to fix asphalt than it is concrete.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Can I interject a question on that?
I'm finished, you can go ahead and,
Did you have something, Commissioner Atchison?
I'm done, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I had a question for engineering. Mr.
Okay.
Kammer, during engineering review, is the pavement depth that the commissioner brought up something that's reviewed in the context of the size of the truck that's going over it?
So not necessarily as much as the size of the truck versus the usage. The engineering manual has minimums for usage, so light duty, which this would be considered, is 3 inches over 6, I think is what they're,
Part of engineering review is to make sure the paving meets the engineering standards?
yes, 100%. So
That's
as long
what
as
I
it
wanted
meets
to
the minimums, again, then it falls back on the applicant for maintenance and things of that nature. So yes.
And for us looking at it.
One thing I forgot to mention, we had called out stone in all of our landscape beds, and you guys have stone not allowed, you have mulch. We have it noted as an alternative. We can certainly do mulch. We don't like mulch because you have to do it yearly. Stone's a one-time, so it's always a preferable for us. You get the landscapers don't know what they're doing. They make the volcanic islands around the trees, which doesn't help the trees. And it just blows around. So we have no issues if the wood chips are what you guys want, that's fine. But every project we do, we typically spec out stone just for the aesthetics as well as it does blow around. You don't have to replace it yearly. So again, we can comply with whatever the desire.
The township typically does not approve stone on any landscape islands. It's just not attractive once the weeds start coming in. So either mulch, or if you don't find mulch appropriate, you can always put lawn or live ground cover. Creeping, one of the ground creepers or something that would cover the island, more greenery.
You just gotta make sure they put the weed barrier down and then you won't get the weeds on the stone.
Still no stone.
The ordinance doesn't allow it.
Yeah, no stone.
I'm sorry, I spoke out of turn.
No, you're fine. I was gonna say.
Mr. Chair, I had a question regarding the adjacent site across the
Okay.
street from Belleville Road. What, if any, driveways, I see one access driveway on this property. What's across the road from it? Do we have a situation where two driveways are facing each other again, or are they well separated on the other side?
It's the bank.
Yeah, there are no driveways across the street that would do it because they all have internal driveways that open to their west through a service drive.
Bell Tire has one though, right? Bell Tire's driveway
Bell
opens
Tire
up right
does.
into the,
We do not.
okay.
And that's directly across from an existing driveway, the Bell Tire one.
Yeah, okay, good. I had another question regarding the cross-access and the one-way signage. My first question is, when is this cross-access issue going to be resolved? Because this right now looks like we're talking an awful lot about traffic circulation, when it sounds to me very likely like there's going to be another cross-access on that plan's turned upside down, right? So on the north side. Yeah, on the north side. So I'm a little concerned about approving anything that has a traffic flow when I don't know where the other cross-access drive is going to be. So I'll throw that out there as I really would be more comfortable knowing what the cross-access situation is going to be with Bell Tire and who's driving it forward. Secondly, there needs to be, I believe I saw in the plan that there is some signage for wrong way, do not enter on the north side of the building, down at the bottom of that plan there. And it wasn't clear to me exactly where the signs for do not enter are located. Are they on the building? Are they on a post? And
They're on a post, one's on the sidewalk, one's on the green belt, either side of that curb,
and
as well as the pavement's painted.
And is that sign in front of that Rosebud Island for the cross? See, there's a cross access down there. Right now, it doesn't connect anything, right? It's right above the north, the pointing south. Yeah, where the mouse pointer is.
Here is the no entry sign, and this is also do not enter, and the pavement is striped. So it's really not close to any tree that would impede the sign. This is a whole concrete island.
What happens if someone comes from the cross access, that cross access on the north side of the property, and then immediately tries to turn left? There isn't enough lane there for two cars to pass.
That's not true.
Is that not true?
No, this is a legal lane right here. It only gets down to narrow for one way at the building itself. That is all two-way aisle accessible.
Oh. It doesn't look like it. I apologize, it's just the width doesn't look like it. And that does meet the standard. Oh, okay, so it's a difference between 17 feet and 24. That's,
It disappeared.
17's at the building.
the 17, it goes down to 17 at the building, and that's why the signs are at the building.
Correct. There's two arrows, one goes up and down in the rest of it.
Okay.
So even till here, it is 24 feet. All of this is 24 feet, two-way movement.
Yeah, I'm gonna say something as soon as I get back.
There's the do not enter.
Oh, I see where it is. So the sign is
Right here.
Right there.
got
And
it.
that aisle is dimensioned right at the cross access that shows it's 24-foot aisle.
Got it.
To the chair. We have done landscaping and approved stone. We did it for Aldi's, we did it for Culver's, and we did it for Menards. And personally, I've seen more mulch in the driveway, running down the driveways. So I don't have a problem with them using stone, but, but we have approved it for 3 other venues, so I do not have a problem if that's what they want.
I agree with that. I remember us having the approval for Aldi's, Culver's, and Menards. With that being said, the mulch, our sewer department, our own sewer department has called businesses complaining that the mulch has gone into the sewage system via Belleville Road when we've had a downpour of rain. And I'm also in agreement with our senior planner, planning consultant regarding the rear of the development, the islands being smaller. There's no issue there. Mhm.
Anybody else comments?
Just a comment for the rest of the chair. That was before my time when you guys approved those, but I agree. If that's something you guys are comfortable with, I have no objection.
Mr. Chair,
Okay.
a question for the senior planner, just to clarify, the deviation from the 5-foot buffer, the previous justification was that we needed more space for a truck to get back there and
Through. There was a drive-through. The drive-through had a stacking lane on the north side. So
Right,
there were vehicles
right.
stacked. We wanted the ability to go past all the
to get
cars. that
to
were
get a fire
waiting.
truck back there.
Exactly.
And the justification for it now is simply that they want to have two-way road up there? That's really,
Yes, and I believe last time the planning commission approved the greenbelt deviation also because Bell Tire has got over a 10-foot wide greenbelt on their site, which is going to remain.
They've got like 30 feet.
Right, sorry, I was trying to think back. I was here for the last time this was approved, and I was trying to remember what the justification was, and it is that the existing building
Yes.
does have a very large
Yes, I believe
green
the
belt.
planning commission at the time said the intent of providing separation between businesses was met because Bell Tire was approved with an extra wide green belt, so it achieved the intent of trying to keep two commercial uses buffered.
I do have a follow-up to that. But that doesn't mean it has to stay that way. If they are the property owners and they wanted to adhere to ordinance, could they build, and they wanted to restructure that parking lot area for bigger drive lanes or whatever, they could push it to within 5 feet of the property line, right?
They could reduce the width of the green belt to
Which-
whatever is the minimum required by the ordinance on
So then
that
there would
side.
only be a green belt on their side, and if there was a drive lane put in, you would lose your turning radiuses. My question.
I mean, it's a legit, I'm sorry, it's a legitimate question because if there's going to be cross-access, then Bell Tire is necessarily going to be reconfiguring some part of that green belt, right? So,
Access. Right, currently on the cross-access, there's a utility pole and a guy wire, and I have a feeling that maybe that's one of the reasons why is they didn't want to pay to have that relocated. That's fairly expensive. I do want to point out that they really can't reduce that 30-foot too much because there's some utilities that are buried there running from front to back. Jason had actually looked to see if they would sell some of that property, and they would not budge and give up any of that. And also, just to remind, you as a board can really hold them to what standard you feel at that point in time if something were to change and they came before you regarding the green belt.
And they've got their parking there. I don't know. Anything's possible. I just don't see a scenario why they would want to encroach on that green belt. Maybe where the cross-access goes, because we would force them, or the township would force them to open it up, but
They
other
can't
than
get
that-
any more parking.
Correct. It
Another
wouldn't be
drive aisle.
conducive.
There's no functional use for them.
The challenge with Bell Tire using up any of the green belt would be, currently their driveway lines up with the driveway across Belleville Road. So were they to widen the driveway, they would now get offset with the driveway across Belleville Road. So it wouldn't make logical sense for them to make their driveway any wider than it already is.
Or future development, if somebody bought the property and redeveloped it.
Oh, if they demolished, yes, that is
I mean, I'm
always
not talking
possible. If
about they're gonna
somebody
be
redevelops the whole
Could be
property.
anybody, and it's really applied to the land, not the owner being there for
Correct.
however many years, right?
Correct.
So I guess the only question I'd follow up on, is there any way that for a change of ownership on their property, that requirement of 5-foot buffer still stays, but for an exception for their, I mean, Sherwin-Williams may not be there forever. They might be there a year or 2 or 5 or whatever your lease, your lease period
better
is. But, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Is there any way, so that maybe, somewhere in the future, if, the Bell property is redeveloped and there's changed ownership, then you may end up in a position where you don't, it's not going to adhere at all to ordinance.
There's a lot of scenarios, and you kind of have to look
I-
at this project on its merits.
I'm just wondering if you can maintain it, I don't know, in any way.
I would hesitate to approve I would like the planning commission to view it as whether the request being made at this point of time is reasonable or not.
Yeah.
Even if they sell it, conditioning the green belt to come back at that time might, the whole site will have to be re-engineered and redesigned at the time. So adding that as a default condition would be very unusual. I've never seen that done. You would, however, if you approved the deviation of the green belt, should the Bell Tire property be redeveloped sometime in the future, you will review the redevelopment of that site in context with what you have granted on this site. You can, because this is now existing. You're looking at it based on what is next to it.
Right.
hey, Mr. Chairman, could the planner confirm that with the 5% deviation of that screening eliminated from we still meet the total required square footage of green belt area? Even with that screening gone, sorry.
Yeah, the green belts are a separate requirement, but the other general landscape areas, yes, they meet the total square footage requirement for the ordinance, and also total parking lot landscape requirement, tree counts, all of those are met. Thank you. thank you for letting me know about the Aldi's and the Menards and Culvers. I wasn't the reviewing, that was Sally's time. So I think if the ordinance needs to be tweaked a little bit, if mulch is going to be an issue for our stormwater drainage, I think that we definitely need to address that in our ordinance. We wouldn't want it to become a stormwater.
Yeah, those ones were right
issue.
before my time too, so I don't remember those ones either, so.
If I could ask, what was the process for getting that approved to stone? If it was, if it was outside the ordinance, did they apply for a variance with it?
No, they just had come to the planning commission, and after much discussion and go around, we said we would allow that to happen.
Look,
We have that as a reserved power to be able to make some
Yes.
modifications to landscaping when the intent of the landscape,
We
we're
did.
convinced it's met.
Right, and we find it to be much more practical. The biggest problem is the getting into the sewers and getting into all the drains, and it gets colored, the discoloration comes out of it. I'm even willing to put even more expensive stone if that's acceptable. There's some really nice stone you get from the UP.
The cobble, the
Yeah.
bigger
Or
looks really nice.
Some of the blue stuff, I mean, you can make these sites really pop with stone. It doesn't have to look all ordinary and, like it's concrete. I prefer it a lot. It's a maintenance nightmare, truthfully. You get cigarette butts in there and you can never get them out with people and stuff like that. Stone, it's a lot more, you have a lot more control over what happens, so.
So would all they get trapped in the structure, the drainage structure?
they
It
go-
wouldn't make it all the way to the detention, the underground detention?
Well, there's clean outs in those systems and things like that
Yeah.
that you have to get to, but by the time you get to them, you never know.
Would be my concern too, that it would back up that whole system and flood the lot, and then it would create a bigger problem, potentially.
And this isn't a Sabrin
But
system.
yeah, I would call the sewer department and consult with them, because
Okay.
we've received phone calls that our mulch is clogging up the drain.
Yes, I can see when we have torrential rain, it's probably going to wash it down, and it's going to block the sewer grates. I can see that becoming an issue, but definitely I will ask.
Yeah, because we actually had pictures coming out of the one shopping center there, where all their mulch was coming down the middle and going right into the storm sewer. And it became a problem for our people to have to clean all that out. And like I said, after conversation with what Culvers had asked for, and particularly Aldi's, and I think they've done a good job of keeping it up. And there was concern that the vegetation would die that was in there. They've replaced what has, and most of it hasn't. So I think they've shown that they can use stone and make it work.
There's no difference in something living or dying, whether it's got stone. I put stone in when I built my house 20 years ago. Nothing died because of the stone.
Right.
I just kind of laugh when I sit up by my pool and I'm having a cocktail and I'm watching all my neighbors shoveling their mulch every spring, and it's like, God, get stone. You don't have to keep doing it, and you add to it, and where does it all go? It rots out, so you can have ant problems, so you get those kind of issues. But you will see it everywhere, I'm sure, because of the rain and the snow, what we've got going on right now. There's probably mulch all over in parking lots, and we prefer stone, but again, if we can get that from this board, that'd be fantastic, but if it's a sticking point, then we'll do what your ordinance says.
Which would come with sort of a maintenance agreement with regard to, keeping the weeds out.
Through the chair,
I'm sorry. First-class development here. We're not gonna have weeds in that property. My tenants won't allow for that, nor will I.
not to belabor the point, in a vacuum, mulch performs very well. It's a time-tested material to hold water and make sure a tree establishes, at least in the first year. But I'm confident we can find stone details that meet some of the same benefits. I know that sometimes with stone, there can be a concern with shock and causing heat distress on the root system, but there's stone that we can look at to meet the intent of the ordinance.
Through the chair, just one clarification on the cross-access. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this right. So whatever problem we have with Belle Tire as a township, whether they're allowing the cross-access, whether there's a variance or not, is not the applicant's issue, right? This is independent because they've allowed it, and they're still going to have the easement on their plans, correct? So it really shouldn't be part of this preliminary improvement.
whether that cross-access from Bell Tire is an issue or not. It's really, I would guess, a township decision whether we're gonna go after Bell Tire to enforce it or not, but not this preliminary approval.
Planning Commission's concerns are to be addressed. What you could do is, they are already providing the easement. You could add a condition saying, at such time when the township resolves the easement issue with Bell Tire, the stub connection shall be paved. Because basically, right now, you're not showing it as paved to the
We're right at the
property
property line, so we just need a curb cut.
That's all they'll need to do. So they'll be able to connect to it.
Right.
They don't have control over Bell Tire, and I'm not really sure of how legally we approach that. I've never had a property owner say no after easement is existing.
Well,
so I
if it's a
don't-
recorded easement, they really can't say no.
Yeah,
Say no until the attorney says, I'm sorry, you can't say no. So they're hoping you're going to accept the no and just walk away.
Yeah.
But they'll eventually have to give in.
Well, I
And
just-
I'm sure
my-
it's been recorded.
My point of bringing it up, I think it's just separate outside of this discussion
I
tonight,
agree completely.
or this decision tonight.
Right.
Yeah, just to build off of that, the applicant has done everything that they can, essentially, with the
That's what
easement and committing to recording the easement. I will say to Commissioner Jar's earlier point, we will check for the original easement and make sure, we wouldn't want a situation where there's an immediate jog that would cause it to be impassable. You know, we want to make sure those two easements are aligned, so we'll make sure we check for that as well.
Mr. Chair, if I could address Director Power for a moment.
Sure.
The concern I have is that the traffic flow on this preliminary plan seems to not take into account that there should be a cross-access there. I'm concerned about, well, let's say you get your cross-access, Bell Tire makes the cross-access. What happens when that delivery pickup truck misses the driveway, turns into Bell Tire, and then tries to circulate back to the, circulate back along the cross-access? Is there going to be a traffic problem when there's potentially another access route onto the property? That's my concern. I think you're going to get your cross-access, maybe not, but as you have to make a traffic plan that takes it into account, my concern is that the current traffic plan doesn't take that type of access into account. If that access, with the cross-access shown, you could show me how the traffic is supposed to flow and that the signage is correct, assuming that the cross-access is put in, then all my concerns are allayed. Yeah?
Address that? All we're required is to show that our site meets all the access requirements of your ordinance. We have done that. We are not liable to have to show you how it can possibly circulate on another site. The other site has to have that access already on their pre-approved plan. One of the issues that I don't like about the cross-access is every community wants them in the front. I believe they should be in the rear because, as Jason said, you have all this cross traffic. You got people coming in, going out, people coming from one site to the other. That's problematic. Some communities have gone to where it's just in the back. And I like that much better. That allows your circulation. But as far as someone driving in the wrong way, that's one of the negatives of the cross-access, because now if a truck pulled into Bell Tire was going into Jason's property, they'd have to turn around some way, shape, or form in Bell Tire, go out and come back. Now when they pull in Bell Tire, they've got to go into an adjacent site. That's not up to us. We're lined up, and we are on a slight 2 or 3 foot angle from theirs to us. It's not a direct straight shot through, and we do have it shown on our plan. It's dashed on there to show how ours lines up with theirs. But theirs, as I said, they have a utility pole and a guy wire that takes up pretty much the whole cross-access location. But we will provide that easement. It will be recorded. Our site meets all stipulations. I would say our site, because of the WB 67 that we have to allow to drive around here, is probably the most accessible site that you have for a development of this size. Typically, the trucks are about 15 feet shorter. So that's why we have some of the islands the shape that we have. And if you look on our truck circulation plan, you can see the tracking, whether it's the wheel or the overhang of the box. So we made sure that we're complying. Our access is obviously with our aisle to their aisle. It's not like their access comes in and you're gonna tee right into where our island is. You know, so we're lined up very well. You know, whether the community wants to go through the ordeal with Bell Tire on that. You know, there are some legal issues with the cross-access on maintenance and your snow removal, and you're wearing someone else's pavement down, ruining someone's pavement, jumping the curbs, ruining their landscaping. So there are some issues that occur with those. That's why I like them in the back, because then you can line them up with an aisle. There's no turning involved. So in any event, that's my spiel on that. But we have addressed everything on our plan that we need to.
Mr. Chair, I was wondering if the planner had a comment on that.
Just a couple of points to ponder. The reason why cross-access is typically not required in the back and we require it in the front is, if you can see Bell Tire, they have a detention pond. So their cross-access, if it comes from the back of their parking lot, is going to go straight into the rear side of your building. So it's not ideal, but most retail buildings will always have a front parking lot. So it's easier to line up a cross-access. Not everybody builds to their rear property line. Many of them just leave the detention pond in the back, like Bell Tire has
But if
done.
they had to do it in the back, they would have to make those provisions. We actually did a retail center for Jason. The adjacent people had a Starbucks, and they actually put Jersey barriers, the barriers that you see on the highway, dividing it to block off the cross-access. So it's like, you know, they didn't want the traffic going through from one site to the next, and we had to fight on that to get that opened up, you know, so they can be an issue. But we're gonna have it. It's gonna be on our plan.
Okay. In this case, if the planning commission has a concern about if the connection to Bell Tire is established, it messing up the circulation plan on this site that you're approving at this time, maybe because the use profile, this site will definitely have a greater volume of traffic than Bell Tires. Even if Bell Tire is popular, it is one use. This is a multi-tenant user, possibly with 2 food service places. The number of vehicles coming in and out of this is going to be higher. So if the planning commission believes that the circulation plan, you're more comfortable with approving what you can see right now rather than leaving the cross-access as unknown, you can always condition that you're recognizing that the applicant is required to provide the cross-access easement, but the actual connection can be established at such future time when the property to the south is redeveloped or redesigned. That way you'll be able to review the circulation as a whole rather than just say, Bell Tire, make a cut in your landscape and connect to them, and now we are not sure how both sites are going to function. If that's a concern, right now you know the plan before you, you know how it's going to function. Legally, we are requiring the cross-access per our ordinance. It's there on Bell Tire, but if you would rather wait for Bell Tire to do something to their property, at which time it'll trigger the cross-access being established, we'll be able to review it more thoroughly than just tell them make a cut and connect to them and sort of make the circulation on both sites questionable. That's possible.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Others? Comments? I do have a concern, though, and maybe Director Power, you can direct it. Belleville Road is a zoo. Especially at rush hour when people are looking and you're looking for food. What is set up for the property to the north? Because we're putting another cut for people to pull into. And I know when I go to Meyer down that direction, that it sometimes is very frustrating with the number of cuts as close as they are together. What are we seeing develop to the north? And what are we looking at? Are we providing in this, if we're providing that easement, enough for vehicles to use this where we don't allow a cut further down? Because the more cuts you have, the more you're backing traffic up, and the more problems we're gonna have with traffic flow. And I know there's people out there that won't travel Belleville Road just because of that.
Mr. Chair, your comment, my comment earlier was about across Belleville Road, do the cuts line up? Yours is, how far away is the northbound cut, correct?
Yeah, how are the cuts
Yeah.
working along that? Because people lined up, you know, you got the turn into Aldi's to get into the back easement across there, and then Meyer Drive.
Yeah.
And there are times I've seen cars lock them up because they're not expecting somebody to turn into Aldi, or they're turning into Myers and people isn't expecting it.
So,
I can just make a comment on that. Keep in mind, these are all old residential parcels.
I completely understand.
Two driveways on our site, had they not be combined by right, it would be entitled to a curb cut absent cross access or another point of access. We're combining those two and creating one cut. I don't know what's gonna happen to the north. I actually tried to buy it a while back and whatever, but like to Vidya's point, we can only control what we can control.
I'm not looking at you, I'm looking, and that's why the question was to Director Power.
I think, Mr. Chair, we originally had our approach when closer to Bell Tires. And then because of the separation, we pushed it furthest to the north. And that was after working with the community. So it was set up differently. Then, I mean, we've gone through probably 10 or 12 reiterations of this plan.
I paid you for all of it.
Not everything. But, so, you know, you have the same jurisdiction with the property to the north of us to have them push their approach as far away as you can. You already know that we have shown on our plan the radius for the cross-access. We've shown the cross-access. It'll be recorded.
Again, I'm not adverse to your plan. I'm wondering what's gonna happen in the future. And I know when we were putting together the Sumter Overlay District, that was a major concern, the number of cuts that could appear along that run. And I notice in a lot of communities where they're in the process of developing, they have those easements and they limit the number of cuts across the front of the main drag so that traffic maintains flow.
exactly. So Mr. Chair, I'll answer.
Yes, please.
Okay, so that's the spirit of access management. We don't have a formal access management plan on Belleville Road, but with every site plan that gets proposed, we infuse the access management standards that are in our zoning ordinance. So you have to balance that with the fact that you can't block any single property owner from having access onto a roadway, right? So when a plan like this comes in, we aim to consolidate driveways and to direct people to signalize intersections on roads that are not the main road. So as plans like this come in place, as the applicant mentioned, they offset their driveway as far as they reasonably could to the north from Bell Tires. They have put in cross-access for the adjacent sites to connect to it. And if these three parcels in the future get redeveloped, we would do the same exact thing in those cases. It would ideally, there would be some sort of consolidation among these three parcels and maybe one single driveway that could occur, at most two, if it's one or two landowners. And then you direct that frontage road up to Westlake Circle where there is a signal and consolidate the traffic and move people away from those hazard points where the driveways go onto Belleville Road. So that's probably the long-term, most feasible, reasonable plan for this. And just establishing that frontage road over time. And I do understand the benefit of having it be more a rear access road, but as Vidya said, this is going to have challenges in the rear of these properties, so it's most reasonably going to be a frontage road that we develop. And as we do that, we'll take out those old residential driveways as part of site plan review.
Okay. That was my concern, is another cut put into Belleville Road that.
Yeah, and if there's shared ownership, you can do more with limiting driveways or restricting right in, right out, and doing things like that. But we are obligated to make sure this site has access.
Right. No, I'm not finding fault with them. I understand completely. And I guess the question would be, in the future, would you be available to the thought of the property to your north, if somebody developed that, allowing your drive to be expanded, to be used in that manner? So we can reduce, I guess to reduce the volume of traffic, you're not gonna reduce the volume of traffic, but allow the flow of traffic to move better.
I guess when that time comes, we'll just have to see. I mean, if it's a use that's complementary and all that, yeah, I mean, I don't wanna say yes or no because you never know what's gonna happen, but certainly, I mean,
That's really what the cross-access is there for. Because if the next site comes in and they get one approach, they're sure as hell, they're sure to use Jason's because it's so close. You know, Bell Tire, their approach for our development really isn't that great. A lot of times you're driving and you're looking for the center, but because of how we've got ours close as we can to the property line, you know, it's gonna function for that next piece. And what you hope is that you don't have individual development on each of those, because we actually looked at 100-foot development ourselves. You could have legally, as Dan said, 3 more approaches in 300 feet. Because you can't be landlocked. We went through this, and the community had an access management, and they were very staunch on it, and we had to have an attorney with us, and they had their attorney. And if finally, they had to back down and say, you cannot deny them access to the property, even though it doesn't meet our access management. Because access management is, all of this is a desired goal, but sometimes you just can't get there based on the size and shape of the property.
I understand. That's, I'm just trying to look into the future of what's gonna happen. And the more cuts you have, the more traffic's gonna back up.
That's just development, you know.
But if we can work together, I guess that's the idea, is that if we can work together, then it's better for everybody involved.
And that's what,
putting it in writing.
yeah, you know, we're putting Jason's approach, like I said, not where we wanted it, because we were trying to create the separation, working with the community, you know, and so that's your power that you have for the people to the north. If and when something comes in, you can dictate that to them.
And I think it's all one owner. I have a feeling that will get developed as one piece.
Okay,
Unless I saw it.
so. Anything else, anybody? Any public comment?
Let's see. There is a Zoom participant tonight, so if the person attending remotely would like to state a question or comment, feel free by raising your hand or entering something in the chat. And it looks like the audience member has nothing that they want to ask at this time, so no comments remotely.
Okay, then, do we have an action on this preliminary site plan?
Chair, I move to grant, oh, I'm sorry, you didn't give me.
See, that's fine. Commissioner Atchison.
I move to grant preliminary site plan approval for case 23-057 for AR Chelsea Architects to develop the property located at 10553-71 Belleville Road for a multi-tenant retail building, to construct a 10,362 square foot multi-tenant retail with parking, landscaping, and site improvements. With that being said, I would like to notate the senior planner consultant, the McKenna letter that details the findings dated January 2nd, 2024. I also would like to request of the applicant that you provide us with all of your sample materials. We are still healing from the last applicant that decided to try to say this is sandstone, and we thought sandstone was something else. So we don't want any of those kinds of hiccups. We don't want to slow you down. So please bring in those materials. If needed, I'll bring a truck and I can help you guys bring them here. In regards to the cross-access, it's requesting administrative approval that the cross-access will line up I'm not sure what else to add for that approval in regards to the cross-access. It must be in the front?
If you would like to state that the cross-access must be established and recorded, however, an actual connection to the property to the south will be determined at a later date at such time when the property to the south is redeveloped or modified.
Ditto what she said. I hope I can say
And a
that.
request, Commissioner Atchison, in my letter, condition number 4, please disregard it. That condition is incorrect. So if you would kindly disregard condition number 4 in my review letter, strike it out in the last.
Strike out condition number 4, eliminating of the RV parking space
Yes,
and striping of the area for parallel parking for larger vehicles. That was due to the elimination of the drive-through. With that, also the Fishbeck letter for the record, everything that has stated in that and requests, the Fishbeck letter dated December 21st, 2023, also containing Director Powers' letter indicating, or that was authored on January 17th, 2024. I believe I have captured everything.
I think
Fire marshal letter, I believe that was January 18th. Fire Marshal Callahan indicating his requests.
I think you need to mention the stone, and I think you need to mention we're approving the ornamental trees instead of the shade trees.
Ornamental trees, please, instead of the shade trees requested. You are free to use stone versus the mulch, and the islands being smaller in dimension to allow for the circulation of emergency vehicles.
And you are granting a waiver from the greenbelt along the south property line. Because that is your authority to grant. You are granting it, okay.
I'll support
Can
all
you-
of that.
Can you, I could not hear her very well, but what, recording secretary, you could hear? Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Atchison and a support from Treasurer Bud concerning case number 23057. Is there any discussion on the motion? Is there any changes, amendments? Great job. With that, seeing no discussion, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Sherry Budd,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Peter Creel,
Yes.
Atkinson. Jackson Paul,
Yes.
Jeff Jar,
Yes.
Brian Cullen.
Yes. You have your preliminary site plan review. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys. We'll make you proud of what we've done.
Thank you. Thanks for hanging for so long.
Yes.
Thank you. I thought you were going to give up on us.
Give up on the Lions. Don't give up.
Roar?
You too, take care. Okay, we are to general discussion and updates. Do we have anything for the commission? Any comments, questions?
Mr. Chair, we're still evaluating if there will be a meeting on February 14th.
Okay.
A tough date
Nothing-
sometimes, but we will see. There's not really anything super urgently pressing for that date, so we may not have our next meeting till the 28th of February, but I'll let everybody know as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you.
With general discussion, if February 14th, if we don't have a meeting because we don't have anything on the agenda, could we possibly have Ms. Kishnan, sorry, I should know it by this time.
Vidya will do.
I don't feel proper calling you by your first name, but anyway, could we do some kind of training, like group training?
I don't know.
I'm thinking on the 14th.
Just a random thought, the email that you just sent out, Dan, regarding the Mishta grant that the township just got, yay. That is amazing. So why not have an informal discussion on housing and how we would like to go about that, what we would like to see? That might be great for us to get an input from the Planning Commission before we.
Yes, and I was planning on having a more extensive announcement on that grant in the next couple of weeks, or the next meeting, for sure.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's-
Good suggestion, because in my heart of hearts, I don't know what affordable housing is. If you read our planning magazine that comes, I believe they said that affordable housing was, I thought it was $340,000. And I thought that was kind of hard to believe, that was affordable housing. It's in our Michigan Planner magazine.
There is a clear distinction between affordable and attainable. Two different things completely, so.
Is that two different sort of developments then? Attainable and affordable?
The price tag for homes, whether they are affordable or attainable, are based on different standards. The prevailing income, the prevailing rate, so there is a clear distinction between the two. I would be interested to see the article where it said that, wow, that is
Okay.
high.
All the more reason now that you've said that we need to have a discussion about the grant. My other question, and I know I could possibly go to the website, but what has happened with Zippy Car Wash?
They obtained their final site plan approval just in December, and so they are going through kind of the pre-construction motions and getting their final design drawings in place, and they have a building permit application under review right now.
So the trustees approve them to move forward.
The trustees had approved the project in January of '23, conditioned on the completion of the traffic study that this planning commission reviewed just last month. So they completed the traffic study, which was the one condition that the board placed on the project, and then it came back and was conditionally approved in December. So yes.
Okay.
Anything else, anyone? Any comments? So, yeah, I agree with you, Commissioner Atchison. That would be a good
Oh, yes.
discussion for us on the 14th if we don't have anything else to deal with.
It's Valentine's Day.
Yeah, oh. Well, you can bring your wife.
Thank you for your consideration, sir.
He said.
I'm sorry, I said, the 14th, I believe, is Valentine's Day.
Day.
Well, we'll make sure we have quorum if we do move forward with the regular meeting.
Get your heart candy right on your plate.
Those little sweetheart candies.
Yes,
It's all-
it'll be on your plate.
Okay, anything else? Then I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn.
We've got a
Second.
motion and a support. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. We are adjourned.